Hey, welcome back, my big brains. We are starting a new unit on adventures with percents, and we start today by converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. So let's head out onto the playground. All right, so let's start with a few things you need to know or remember. A lot of this is probably review for you. The word percent means out of 100. If you can't remember anything else, always remember that percent means out of 100. That's going to help you greatly going forward. So here are some reference points for you in regards to fractions, decimals, and percents. If I have 1% as a fraction, remember that percent means out of 100, so that would be 1/100th. 10% means 10 out of 100. And then we know we can simplify that fraction. So 10% is 1/10. 50% is 50 out of 100. We can simplify that to 5/10, which we also should be able to recognize is 1/2. 50% is 1/2. 100%, that means 100 out of 100. And we can simplify that to 1. Okay, so then some decimals as a reference point. 1%, 1/100th as a fraction. We can also write 1/100th like this. 10% is 1/10. We can write it like that. 50% is 1/2. It's also 5/10. And 100% as a fraction and a decimal is the exact same thing. It's a whole 1. One more thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with decimals and fractions. You want to always have your fraction in its lowest terms, in its most simple form. And it cannot ever have fractions or decimals in it. Let's talk a little bit about converting between these. First, let's look at how you would convert fractions into decimals or percents. We begin with converting fractions to decimals. The way you do this is you convert the denominator to a power of 10, if possible, and then you would divide the numerator by the denominator. Or, if it's not possible to get the denominator to a power of 10, then you just divide the numerator by the denominator. So first we have an example of 1/5. The denominator is 5. We can get that to a power of 10, right? We could convert that into 2/10, and we can write 2/10 like this, okay? But what about something like 1/6? Well, we can't get 6 to a power of 10, so in this case, you would just divide 1 by 6, and in that case, it would become 1, and then the 6 is repeating off into infinity. At that point, you can use your calculator. All right, what about turning fractions into percents? Well, then you would just multiply by 100. So again, if I had 1/5, I multiply that by 100. That is 100/5. Well, 100/5 simplifies to 20%. And if I have 1/6, you multiply that by 100, that is 100/6. And you're allowed to use your calculator at this point. That is 16 with the 6 repeating off into infinity. Also, that is 16 2/3%. All right, let's look at how you convert decimals. If we want to convert a decimal to a fraction, you just read it the way it's written. So in this case, we have 12 hundredths. I would just rewrite that as 12 hundredths, which we can also simplify to 3/25. And then maybe the easiest one, converting a decimal to a percent, you just multiply the decimal by 100. So if I have 37 hundredths, I multiply it by 100, that is 37%. And then lastly, converting a percent to a fraction and percents to decimals. When you're doing percents to fractions, you divide by 100 in fraction form, and then you simplify it. So if I have 45%, I'm going to divide the 45 by 100, because again, percent means out of 100. And I can simplify that. Those are both multiples of 5. 45% is 9/20. And if I want to turn a percent to a decimal, I would divide it and then put it in decimal form. So same example, 45%, 45 divided by 100. Well, when you divide a number by 100, you move the decimal to the left 2 places because it's 2 powers of 10, and we would have as our answer 45 hundredths in decimal form. Let's try just a few more examples of converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. In this case, I am given 27.5%. Well, as a fraction, 27.5% means 27 5/10 out of 100. Well, the first thing I might want to do is I'm going to multiply them both by 10 so I can get rid of that decimal point. I now have 275 out of 1,000. You should be able to notice that both of those are multiples of 25. There are 4 25s in 100, and I have 10 hundredths in 1,000. So this is 40. 2 hundredths means I have 8 25s, and then I have 3 more of them, so I have 11 40ths. And then converting from a percent to a decimal, I am going to divide by 100. That is 2 powers of 10, so I move the decimal over twice. And as a decimal, 27.5% is 275 thousandths. Next up, I'm given 2 thousandths. To convert that to a percent, I multiply by 100. That's 2 powers of 10, so I move the decimal to the right, and I'm left with 0.2%. And then as a fraction, I just write it like I read it, 2 thousandths, which I can reduce to 1/500th. All right, let's try a mixed numeral. I have 1 and 4/5. First, I want to convert that to a decimal. The 1 just becomes 1, and 4/5 converted to a decimal Well, I could convert this to 1 8/10, and then because it's in a power of 10, I can just write that. So 1 4/5 is 1.8, and then to convert that to a percent, I multiply it by 100. That's 2 powers of 10. I move the decimal point 2 to the right. That's 180%. And then one more example, just so we always are paying attention to details. How would you write half of 1% as a fraction and a decimal? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to write this as half of a percent in decimal form. Going from percent to decimal, I'm dividing by 100, so I move the decimal to the left 2 powers of 10, and I end up with 5 thousandths as a decimal. Well, 5 thousandths as a decimal, I can write that as a fraction 5 thousandths, and then because those are both multiples of 5, I can write that as 1/200th. So the reason for this example is just to make sure we pay attention to how big or small the percent is. So in this case, half of 1% is going to be a very small decimal and a very small fraction. All right, that is our overview of converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. If you have any questions at all, feel free to watch parts or all of the video again. And as always, you can email me with your questions, and I look forward to joining you on our next math adventure.